was in school.
I think we're back here, alhamdulillah. Take a little while. All right, alhamdulillah. I think we're back. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم ينفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ينفعنا وزد علما يكرم يا رب العالمين. اللهم نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا واسعا وشفاء لكل داء آمين يا رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I apologize for the late start here. So we're on the fifth session here of going over the Seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So last time, just while we were gone last week, just as a reminder, we went over how Omar and Hamza both converted to Islam, and that gave the Muslims a whole different dynamic now. Now they have some power, they have some might, they have more respect now, and how we talked about how it's virtuous to go after certain people who have influence in the community because they will, have influence on others if they become Muslim, right? And so whether that's basketball players or, influencers on YouTube and Instagram, that, alhamdulillah, they get the message, they disseminate it much better than we can. So there's nothing wrong in that. And they'll bring might to Islam, inshallah ta'ala. And then after that, the Quraysh wondered, how are they going to stop this message now? That they have Omar or they have Hamza, they're praying in front of the Kaaba now. So they have to come up with a different type of grand scheme, if you will. We're going to talk about that. They're going to have a thing called the boycott, where they come up and try to boycott the Muslims as another dynamic to try to stop the message. And then we're going to go over what happens after that. I just want to talk about how was the prayer at this time. Some people ask during the beginning of Islam, what was the prayer at that time? Were they praying 5 times a day? What was actually going on? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran multiple times. You see this verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Sabbih bihamdi rabbika bi'ashihi wa la ibkar." That praise your Lord in the evening and the morning. So at the beginning, there was 2 prayers in the day, like a Fajr prayer and an Asr prayer. And it was 2 units of prayer, or rakatan, right? 2 rakats, if you will. And that's what they would pray. Okay, that was like mandatory on the Muslims at that time. So at least they had that. The 5 daily prayers did not come down as of yet, and it will come down shortly. Next class, we'll kind of go over that, inshallah ta'ala. Okay. Angel Jibreel alayhi salam came and taught the Prophet the prayer, taught him also the how to make wudu, and then they taught the Muslims how to do that. So they knew how to make wudu at that time. They knew how to pray, and that was something the Prophet was teaching the early Muslims. The Prophet himself, he would pray the Hajj prayer. That was obligatory upon him, and he would something that he would continue for the rest of his life, that he would always do. As a leader, you have to get yourself into a higher, rank or higher, conditions, if you will, standards, right? And so the Prophet would do that, and that would only make him stronger. And that's a good lesson for all of us. The Hajj prayer is something that has a lot of virtue to it. To get up out of your bed, something that I could definitely struggle on, because obviously you're tired, but it makes so much more virtuous, and you have much more strength when you're able to do that, and all the worldly desires that will come your way if you're able to get up at nighttime and take those covers off your bed, even though how tired you may be. Okay, so that's what the prayer was during that time of the Prophet. So the Quraysh, right? So they had this new plan that what are they going to do? So it's very interesting. They sent this person named Utbah ibn Rabi'ah. Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, the Quraysh started planning. They said, who could we send to the Prophet ﷺ, or Muhammad as they would say, and negotiate with him to get him to stop this message? Now they have Omar, now they have Hamza on their team now. And Utbah was also a very good poet. And so that maybe that he could challenge him with his poetry, and that he could meet with him and go over. So he went to the Prophet ﷺ and came with this offer. That we'll give you all the wealth if you want. If you want money, is that what you're really coming here for? We'll give you all the wealth. You can stop this message. Stop this preaching. You're dividing up our city, dividing up our families. Then if you want leadership, we'll make you the king of the tribe. If you want that. You become the president. You have all the honor and you make the decisions. If you want women, we'll give you that. If you want medical treatment because you are, possessed with something, that's what they thought also, then we'll bring the best, people that could come and cure you in the city. So anything to stop the message. Now, today, if some, president of a Muslim country or anyone in general would come and say, hey, here's this good, lump sum of money here, just vote this way, right? And then we'll be okay with you. And we see that's done a lot in our society. And a lot of unfortunately, our policies are in the Congress and Senate, with all due respect to them, a lot of lobbying goes on. You guys know lobbyists, right? And I think I mentioned this before, that if you go to, I think it's called I need to get the exact website. I think it's Secret Whispers or Secret Voices or something.com. And they basically list all the money that goes to different senators and different congressmen, from big farm to oil and gas companies to this sector to that sector. And you can see how much NRA, the National Rifles Association, how much money goes to the people to vote either for anti-gun laws or for drilling of this oil, or to pass this, this type of legislation. And they get a good amount of money to do that. You would think that should be illegal, that someone gives you money to vote this way. You think, why would our system be based on that? But I don't know, that's just how it is. I'm not too sure what the rulings are. But here, the same thing here. They're trying to give the Prophet everything they would, trying to buy him out. And the Prophet ﷺ does not do that at all. What comes down this time is Surah Fussilat, chapter number 41 in the Quran. It's a long surah, but around 38 ayat come down to the point on the 38th verse is a verse of prostration. Okay, and the Prophet makes prostration at the end. And this talks about a lot about the Quraysh themselves denying the message, talk about Ad and Thamud, 2 Arab tribes that came before the Quraysh long time ago, what happened to them. So he's trying to give them a sign, like, look what happened to them, why don't you accept the message? And Utbah ibn Rabi'ah goes back to the Quraysh after hearing that the Prophet is not going to give up his message. He goes up to Quraysh and says, I've never heard words similar to those he recited. I'm a poet myself, right? I write poetry. I've never heard something like this ever at all. And the Quraysh leaders didn't like that. They thought that he became under a spell, that he's talking gibberish, like he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's gone mad himself now, right? So now they're turning against him, right? And he said, oh, people of the Quraysh, I request you to heed my advice and grant him full freedom to pursue his goals. What he's saying is something totally different. He is basically saying he's right. He never became, from what I understand, became Muslim himself. At least I'm not remembering that. And he basically is saying that he is a prophet, pretty much. Right? And then he says, Abu Jahl gets up and says, you are making up a lie. Utbah, you're under a spell. He doesn't know what he's saying there. So it shows how clearly that people could see the message and know it and still not accept it, even though how that clear that is. That's why it really makes me and you like really fortunate about our Islam. And we could have been on the other side of the fence where we watch news all day and we watch all the different things people say, and God is a myth and this stuff. I just want to make my money and drive my cars and just be happy, and that would be a good life for myself, right? But Allah gave us some type of critical thinking that made us think about, hey, what am I doing in my life? Okay, so that's something that I always, in my khutbahs, I always mention that at the beginning, how much we thank Allah for guidance, for hidayah. You know what I mean? It's just, if you didn't have that, who knows where me and you would be right now. Okay? The rest of the sheep, right, going wherever the wind blows and so forth, right? So that is their plan there, and this is what happens, and Uqba comes back. So that basically gets shut down. So that doesn't work. So guess what? The Quraysh have to think about something else. So what are they thinking about now? They went to this offer now. Hey, here's another offer. How about we worship Allah for one day, and we worship our gods for the other day? Okay, so we have a 50-50 split. Okay, that'll be kind of good. Okay, and I'll ask some of you guys here that you think that's a good offer. You think that would be something that would be beneficial to do, right? If everybody, think about it, everyone in America, okay, will have to worship Allah for one day. Okay, all the TV screens, you have the adhan go on 5 times a day, right? People might not know how to pray, so I don't know how that's going to work, right? But anyhow, you just have that broadcasted, or at least that's official statement from Biden. So he gets up and makes his statement, right? Don't you think that how much dawah that would do, right? Everyone now has to read about Islam, how they worship, what this new plan is. What do you think about that offer? What is the pros and cons of that offer? What would you think? Would you do something like that if it happened today?
Well, it's a compromise that you don't want either, because you don't want to compromise.
So you don't want to compromise.
So it's kind of a compromise. It's kind of accepting the other way of worshiping as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you agree to it, if you formally agree to it,
yeah.
Of course there's a benefit, because it could turn a lot of people to the truth.
Right.
And there's also the disadvantage that you basically give up somehow the uniqueness and the right way, as being the only way. Mm-hmm. You say, well, I'm accepting other ways that are okay as well, equal to mine.
Good. Okay, that's good points there.
Yeah, it's just like to add on to what he was saying. You're equating shirk essentially. You're just saying you yourself would be doing shirk in the process because you're leaving Islam for a day.
Very good. Yeah.
And it's like so you don't want to do that, and it's like nothing is worth doing that, even if it does. Even if it is a dawah, dawah doesn't mean you sacrifice your own beliefs.
Very good.
You still have to hold on to it for yourself, otherwise you're almost like a munafiq at that point.
Yeah. So this is excellent, right? So there's certain values. Like, for example, if I give you guys an example here, we're going to go over this later on. We have the thing called the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. It's going to come on maybe 5-6 classes down the line now. And where the Prophet ﷺ agrees with the Quraysh that we're not going to fight you for 10 years. And we will not make Umrah this year, and we'll go back to Medina. And next year we can make Umrah. And we can't bring swords, and we can't bring knives, and anyone who becomes Muslim in Mecca, they cannot go to Medina and meet me. They have to stay in Mecca. So there's a lot of policy like this. What is the difference between something like that, where the Prophet agrees to not fight the Quraysh for 10 years, agrees not to perform Umrah, right? Agrees that any Muslim in Mecca that becomes Muslim cannot go to Medina, and they have to stay in Mecca, right? What's the difference between something like that, right?
They don't compromise the faith.
They don't compromise the faith, okay?
Yeah, number one, like he said, it doesn't take you outside the fold of Islam. And number two, the Prophet ﷺ had hikmah for doing these things. Like there was obviously a good reason and a benefit to doing these things, like to keep the peace, etc. So, and also like like you said, you don't have to. These are not far backs. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to go to Medina. You don't have to go for Umrah.
Yeah.
And there could be other opportunities in the future. That might be part of the wisdom.
That's good. Excellent points here. And that's a big lesson for us here in America, because at least, I don't know if any of you guys are going to be politicians or are going to run for office one of these days. But that's where our quote-unquote Muslim politicians are in the issue, where you see them, they're Muslim, mashallah, they take their oath on the Quran, and we get all happy, right? Well, which we should, right? We have some influence. And then you might see some other like moral and creed type issues where whether they're supporting LGBT rights and you're like, hold on, that's really against the Quran, but you say maybe it's a tough position with them because they're in leadership and right? But here that you see the perfect example here. The Prophet doesn't compromise on points of morale and points of what? Of faith and so forth, right? It's a hard line to walk when you have a lot of people pointing to you. You might lose office if you go another way. But what's more greater is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But anyhow, so may Allah guide those individuals that are there. I know obviously they can do great good, but at the same time, they can really confuse people and cause a lot of harm.
Yeah, like when you mention all those harms and things like that, it's like at that point you might as well not run because I'm serious. Like it's not good to rule with these types of laws, and then it's also like just look at the harm you're causing. It's like because if you're going into a job knowing that you're going to be put in an awkward position or there's going to be lots of haram, you can stay away from that.
Right.
Because the fitna that could it doesn't make sense.
So it's a very hard plan, but that's basically what people are trying to do. We have these lessons here to kind of go over. We have Surah Kafirun that was real at that time, where Allah subhanahu makes it very clear that you have your religion and we have our religion. We worship what we worship. I do not worship what you worship, right? It's totally different. It's black and white. They don't even mix at all. Oil and water, kind of, if you will, right? And that's something where we have to be very clear, especially also this interfaith gatherings, which is good to have relationships with Christians and Jews, whoever wants to work with us, right? But then at the same time, if you have your worship, we'll respectfully stand to the side. And when we have our worship, you could either follow along or we'll do whatever you have to do, but it doesn't mean necessarily that we have to follow what you're doing, and that's something we have to make very clear also. They also asked for some miracle, and they didn't get any also. Even though we have that the Prophet split the moon, we put up his hand and the moon split. We have that one incident that's narrated, and the Quraysh saw that, and then they said it's magic, pretty much. But they wanted other miracles, but you never have a really big miracle like the parting of the sea. Like the people of Thamud, where a camel came out of the rock of a mountain. That's pretty crazy to see. Ibrahim alayhi salam walking out of fire. He was in. You don't really have that. And one thing we learned from all the miracles that happened previously to all the prophets, it really didn't do much for their people. Even that shows you how big their arrogance is. Only a small group of people actually became and followed their prophets after seeing the miracle in front of them. Ibrahim alayhi salam walks out of fire. I don't know about me and you, but if you were standing there and see that, you would say like, okay, this guy must have some type of proof, right? But it's mentioned that not a lot, maybe a handful of people actually followed him after, if any. But we don't have much narrations on that at all, right? When the camel came out of the rock of the tribe of Thamud, it's mentioned that not many people actually followed that, and followed them after the Prophet Saleh afterwards, right? And then, of course, you have the parting of the sea. Of course, the Pharaoh died in that, and we didn't have much of them afterwards. But even the Bani Israel, they started worshiping a golden calf right after the parting of the sea, which is even more stranger. And then they're already your believers and followers, right? So the answer is not always about miracles. What miracle did your prophet give? The biggest miracle we always say in Islam is the Quran, right? But you have to really understand the Arabic language to really appreciate that. So here we go. So they decide, we're going to do a boycott. So we can't harm him. We threw things at him. We call him a magician. We call him a sorcerer. We call him a liar. We call him like he's crazy. He's possessed. All these different things. So the next thing is to boycott. And here in America, we kind of, have experienced some of these things. We get called names all the time, obviously. We went through our terrorist phase. I don't know if everyone still calls terrorists. Maybe they do. I'm not too sure. Maybe they got tired of that. But they have all these other type of things that they try to wipe Islam about. They're going to take over this country. They're going to do this, going to change their laws, everything. And then boycott will be something that might happen. Or we have this Muslim ban. You remember the ban that Trump kind of stopped people coming from certain Muslim countries to America. It really didn't affect us on the ground here. We could still trade and eat and nobody really stopped us. But from countries immigrating, from Muslim, quote unquote, Muslim countries immigrating to America, that was, stopped. But so that's a pretty big legislation, which I think, obviously, they ended it a while ago. I'm not too sure what year, but anyhow. So very similar. They decided, no business trading to the Muslims. Basically, what they meant by Muslims, the tribe of Bani Hashim and Bani Abdul Muttalib. These two clans within the Quraysh. There's clans within the Quraysh, right? So within the clan of Quraysh, there's Bani Hashim, where the Prophet is from, and Bani Muttalib. These two will not deal business with them, which is you never see before that in tribe itself, like within Garden Grove, certain streets, you don't deal with them, for example. You wouldn't do that to your own city. This is the own family. So then something the Arabs never seen before. And so they said, we will not business with them, will not intermarriage, intermarriage with their clan, no social relations, we don't even talk to them at all, okay? No visits, no contracts, nothing. Okay? And so what that made them do is that it made that Abu Talib, who's part of many, from these clans, to take these two clans out and live outside of the city, because it was too hard to live within the people. So if they had their own, area outside where they could work together, and maybe they can have some communication with outside tribes, then they would have done that. That's what they did. And they put the boycott, they put the terms of the boycott on the door of the Kaaba, they nailed it there, so everybody has to follow this policy here, okay? Muslims and non-Muslims, which is very interesting. Muslims and non-Muslims of these clans, because not everyone was Muslim in this clan, they also had to be kicked out. And even though they're not Muslim, they're guilty by association, right? That they have to be, they know there's no trading with them either. And if you think about it, that puts a lot of pressure on the Prophet ﷺ, that what he's doing is causing the harm of his whole clan. People who are not even Muslim are getting treated bad because of what I'm doing. Now that's a lot of pressure. You wake up every morning knowing that these people are suffering now. They can't buy food, they can't, talk to people. Prices are very high for them to buy things elsewhere. And the Prophet has to do that every single day, right? But that himself, that doesn't stop him. Do you think that bothered him a lot? It won't bother me very much from whatever I did. All of Isaac, has to suffer, or all of the Garden Grove or whatever, right? That would make you feel bad every single day. It would make you feel like, if I just give up, these people could eat and they could give up. They could live a life better. You would think that would be something that they would also might be thinking about. There's not a lot of narrations that's mentioned about these years of boycott. Some say a year and a half, some say up to 3 years, but there's not a lot mentioned within it. Number one, it's a lot of the Muslims that were there during this time, they didn't live long enough to where the hadith collectors collected all the information. And also people just naturally don't like to talk about their bad times. Right? Remember when this had so bad and we had to go through this hardship and what the Quraysh did to us. So we just don't have a lot of narrations of what exactly actually everyday life happened over there. We do have some narrations. I mentioned that they would eat leaves. They would eat like this shrubs because food they could not even get. Right? I think there's a narration by Bilal where he says that his kind of graphic, but he's saying like our feces were almost like sheep. We're basically all like this, greens, if you will, like, grass and so forth. Became almost just like theirs because that's all that they were doing. Okay, and that brings a lot of pressure on the Prophet as I mentioned. But what happened is that people from other clans felt bad for their own family. Okay, and this is our own family. If you think about it, we're all part of the Quraysh, right? This one brother and a bunch of sons. That's pretty much what a tribe is. And so, why don't we just lift it off of them? Look how much they're suffering. They learned their lesson already. And what happens? It builds sympathy to the Muslims. I think even if you guys remember when they had the Muslim ban, if you would see the protests that happened at LAX and different places, majority of them, or a lot of them, are non-Muslims that came out, right? What's that guy? What's his name? I always forget his name. What's his gosh? He made the movie Fahrenheit 9/11. Michael Moore. Michael Moore stands in front of the Trump Towers with a sign that says "I am Muslim," right? He didn't take a shahada from what I understand, but basically saying we're all we're all black, we're all Asian, we're all so same thing. So they think that basically I feel what they're feeling also, right? For him to put up a sign like that, other people to go up there and start having sympathy with the Muslims, that's a great time for dawah also. They get to learn a little bit about us, and inshallah they accept the message also. We really don't like dawah to come from that angle, but it is what it is, right? So people started feeling bad for the Muslims. They started, actually advocating for the lifting up the boycott from what they were going through because of this sympathy that they were feeling. The Prophet ﷺ, it's pretty much a miracle in itself, tells Abu Talib, his uncle, who are all of them who are suffering, he said, go back to the leaders of the Quraysh. Tell them that the pact that they put on the door there, if they will look at it, it has been eaten up. And the only thing is left is the name of Allah. Because the Quraysh still believed in Allah. They believed Get other partners, though, we all know. And say, if you go there, you see the word Allah that's still there. Termites or whatever bugs have eaten the whole paper. And he went back and they told Abu Jahl about this and all the leaders, and they started arguing that, we should do this. He said, okay, if this is the case, then we'll do it. But it might be a sign. They go back and they find out that, yes, the paper has been eaten, and what? Only in the name of Allah that's left over. For me, that's enough of a miracle to believe in somebody, if you will. And then they lifted the boycott. Now the Muslims were able to come back and live within the Quraysh, but they were able to bear that for, like I said, some narrations, 1.5 years or 3 years. I would say for all of us here, just now to make it a little bit personal, that we're living with the Seerah here, that if all of us were here in Garden Grove or Westminster or wherever you guys are at, and there was a rule that, nobody sell to me and you, and we went, and it was because of our leader, okay, whoever our leader was, and because of whatever he's preaching, that Islam is this and Islam is that, we agree with that policy, that nobody would buy and sell with us, right? We couldn't marry to certain people, etc. Right? How would we live our life? Right? Would we probably forget about it? I'm going to move to Canada, right? Canada accepts everyone pretty much, right? So go to Canada, let's go to somewhere else, let's go back to this country, let's go back to that country. Or should we just stay here and just grunt it out and support our leader, right? Imagine what the Muslims will do today. What do you think they would do? I have a feeling that they might leave that leader there and everyone is, goes away. This is too hard, I'm just not worth it. You know what I mean? This is go somewhere else, right? I would think that might happen. There might be a certain group that stays and just toughs it out, but that would be very hard, I think, on most people. But we're talking about these people stayed there, right, with the Prophet ﷺ for those 1.5 years, 3 years. That's why those group of early Muslims are just amazing. Their belief is on a higher level because they were tested so hard. Talk to Palestinians that live through occupation, where they have to go through checkpoints and they have to smuggle food and stuff. And they talk about them and they're, my son died, my grandpa died, my uncle died in this war, in this battle and stuff. For them, it's quite normal. Imagine their belief that they still believe this is our land and we were going to go there. Same thing with Kashmir. Same thing with this and this in different areas, if you will. Their iman is going to be much, much more higher. So Allah is preparing people for a certain reason. But sometimes it's good to accept the hardship. And I always believe that it's for wisdom, and Allah is making me and you stronger for whatever we go through. And so, even though it's tough to go through hardship, though nobody wants to go through hardship, but it's part of the divine plan. So it was finally lifted up here. Alhamdulillah, the Muslims were able to get out of this boycott. Of course, anyone living for 1.5 years eating trees and not people buying from them. As mentioned, that Abu Jahl, when tribes will come in, he would go to them first and buy their goods before it comes to the Muslims cannot buy it. Or he said, I'll buy it for double the price. So the Muslims couldn't buy anything, right? This is the certain things that were happening.
This reminds me of Yajuj and Majuj. What we're told about them is that they're going to eat up everything. If there's any food, my mom told me that, let's say that you have a store with just a shelf of food, they're just going to eat it immediately. And
they'll take up a lot of resources. Yeah. That's one thing that's mentioned. Some similarities. Yeah, that's what
this reminds me of.
Yeah. So after this boycott, Abu Talib, he is the main door protection between the Quraysh and the Prophet ﷺ, right? In terms of actually really harming him or assassinating him or doing something to the Muslims. They at least regarded these family relations, if you will, these tribal leaders. And so after this boycott, he gets extremely ill. He gets really sick, possibly because of the boycott and living in this land that, this time where they didn't have much, nutrients and so forth. And the Prophet ﷺ goes to him on his deathbed and says, "Oh, my uncle, make a profession that there's no God other than Allah, that I could testify before Allah for you. I could say, oh Allah, he did this on his deathbed, right? He did believe in you, right? And that he followed me, right? He protected me so that he will at least go to Jannah, inshallah ta'ala, and he'll be treated fairly." Abu Jahl is standing right next to the Prophet ﷺ, on the deathbed, obviously. He's not going to stay quiet. What did he say? He said, Abu Talib, would you abandon the religion of Abdul Muttalib, your grandfather? Would you do something like that? Think about what you're saying, right? This is your grandfather that set this religion. This is going to be, blasphemy for him. This is going to be disrespect to the family, to our tribe. Don't do that. And then, so what he says, I will not leave my religion. I will keep it there, and I don't want to disrespect my elders, right? And this is only very interesting when you talk to people who convert, the new Muslims, if you will. They go through a lot of hardship because when they become Muslim, as if they disgrace their family and their culture, whether they're Latino, Caucasian, whatever they may be, right? And so their family's like, how can you go against us? It's almost like it's religion and family. I'm still your family. I'm still from this. I could speak your language. I could do everything, right? I could dress whatever you want me to dress. But the religion is different. But for them, it's just how dare you turn your back on your parents and so forth, which I can understand where the argument comes from. But anyhow, that's very, very hard. So that's why it's very important when we see new Muslims, right? Alhamdulillah, right? That we try to embrace them and make them feel welcome and help them into our community, because it's going to be very, very tough that your brother Chad over here, mashallah, right? That because they have gone through a lot to leave what they have. And believe me, usually the families are not celebrating them. Yeah, you became Muslim. It's something weird. When you were born, we were wishing that you become a Muslim, right? They're not saying that. They're just saying, question them, making them doubt every second, and telling me you're dressing weird, you're looking weird, and they're going to try to make it as hard on them as possible. So it's something just to think about. So this happens here. Abu Talib passed away. What's the main thing why Abu Talib passed away? What is the main issue with Abu Talib passing away, other than that's the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What's the main political impact of that, of Abu Talib passing away? Kind of mentioned it earlier.
He was the protector. He was the link between the.
Very good, right? So now the Prophet doesn't have no one that's stepping in front of him and protecting him from the harm. So now who's going to step up and do that? That's the next thing. You think anyone else wants to go through what happened with Abu Talib and got kicked out, had to leave the city of Mecca and live outside the outskirts? Nobody's going to stand up now. So the Prophet pretty much is fair game now to do whatever you want to him. If you want to assassinate him, no one's going to protect him. No one's going to say it's wrong or right. And so that becomes even a harder issue. Now, the Prophet understands that. Also, at the same time, we have, this is a good point here to mention, is that the Prophet ﷺ, even when Abu Talib passed away as a non-Muslim, right? The Prophet ﷺ wants to make dua for him, ask for Allah's forgiveness for him, okay? Because all that what he did, I think all of us would agree what he did was, greater than sometimes what Muslims would do, okay? And so there's a narration here where the Prophet said, by Allah, I will persistently beg pardon. I will make dua. I'll ask for, Allah to forgive you until I'm forbidden to do so. I'll just keep on asking Allah to forgive you. That's what he's telling his uncle. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals in Surah Tawbah, chapter number 9 in the Quran, that it's not proper for the Prophet and those who believe, like me and you, to ask for forgiveness for the mushrikeen, those who are not Muslim, even though they be of kin, even though they're your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, if after it has become clear to them, they are the dwellers of the hellfire. That they did not believe pretty much. And this is very hard for people who have non-Muslim family. That's my mom, that's my dad, how can I not make dua for them? The way we understand this is that, number one, if somebody passes away, we all know that their book is closed. For Muslim, the book is closed. We all can agree on that, whether you're non-Muslim or you're Muslim. So you would say it's fair that whatever happens afterwards, someone says, oh Allah, forgive that person, their book is closed, right? That's it, it's locked. Nothing else can happen there, right? And so it is of the mercy for believers from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as believers that exceptions given to the believers that they can still ask for forgiveness even to another Muslim, even though the book is closed. Right? You think that shouldn't be fair because they're done. They're not breathing anymore. That's it. The angels are not writing anything anymore. The scribe, everything is done there, right? So here it's just more of an exception that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it where me and you could still make dua for those who believed as a right for them, as a reward for them for believing, that may Allah, forgive my grandfather, my uncle, right? And also we do sadaqah, we could do sadaqah in their name. We donate some money. Allah give the reward to that person, even though they didn't do it. They're not even here. I'm the one giving money. So why would they, even though I say I'm giving money on their behalf, they're not even acknowledging it because they're not even breathing. They can't say, yes, I accept you for doing this, right? So this is a special, case that Allah gives to those who are believers, right? And so this is something that Allah obviously forbid for those who are non-Muslims. Yes, it is very tough that someone who has a non-Muslim family, that to say that, my mom passed away or my brother passed away, can I ask Allah that, everyone loves their mother, right? That's a very special person. To make dua for them, then this would, not for myself, but from the one who created us, that would not be possible. That would be allowed. And even for the Prophet ﷺ, he wanted to make dua for his own mother, his own father. And it's also narrated that the same thing, that Allah did not allow him to do that, right? Because they were necessarily believers also. All right. So, it's a little bit hard thing to follow, but this is part of what Allah SWT ordains for us. And of course, gives us a much more emphasis to whoever we have non-Muslim family to try to get them to believe as much as possible, right? Even though like I talked to him 10, 14 times, becomes more of an argument, but still never give up. Just never give up, because you never know that when that seed will finally be planted. It might be on their deathbed, kind of like Abu Talib here, right? But something just always kind of do, and we ask Allah subhanahu to guide our non-Muslim families and friends to Islam, and help them realize who their Lord is and how to worship Him, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Surah Qasas, oh verily you, Muhammad, guide not who you will. You will not be able to guide who you want. You want to guide your uncle, but Allah decides that for certain reasons, and that's something. If anybody will get exception to this, it would be the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anybody will get exception to this. It would be the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So by you saying, I can't make dua for this person, that person, guess what? You're in the same category as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You couldn't do that either. So it's something just to think about it that way. That will also apply to everybody. Okay. So the death of Abu Talib. Okay. This is another thing that's also mentioned about him, though. It was narrated that Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib said to the Prophet ﷺ, you have not been of any avail to your uncle. You have not been any help to your uncle, Abu Talib, right? He did all this stuff for you. By Allah, he used to protect you. He used to become angry on your behalf. And the Prophet says, he shall be in the most shallow part of Jahannam. And had not been for me, he would be in the bottom of the hellfire. He mentioned that fire will come up to his ankles. I mean, first of all, we don't want anyone to smell the fire. We don't want to see the fire. But he will have a very minimum punishment. That's what's meant. Would Allah save him after that and put him into Jannah? Allah makes those decisions. I mean, you don't. So Allah knows what's believed in his heart and what he's done. And that could be possible, and that might not be possible. Right? Of course, we have a lot of liking for Abu Talib, even though he's not Muslim, because what he did for the Prophet ﷺ. The second thing that happened in the same year, in the 10th year, some say it's 2 months after, some narrations say 3 days after, is the passing away of his dear wife, Khadija. Now, this is called the year of sadness, the 10th year of prophethood, because the Prophet lost his uncle, who was the political protection of him, right, outside protection, and lost his wife, who was the internal, inside the house, comfort and protection for the Prophet. Okay. Now you don't go home to anybody that's going to be there for you and console you, right? So now your wife is gone now, okay? And this is a very, very tough time. So she passed away. This made the Prophet extremely sad. He did not marry anyone else during the time when he was married to Khadija. Every other wife, he married someone else while he was married to that wife. We'll go over some of those reasons why. But he didn't marry anyone else when he was married to Khadija. That shows you, number one, whether he was super satisfied, well, that's the way that Allah ordained it. Okay, and so he said something very beautiful about her, that she believed in me when no one else did. Right, the first thing, guys, remember when he got the first revelation, what did he do? Did he run to Abu Bakr and say, Abu Bakr, you're my good friend? You know what happened? He ran to his wife. Right, first thing, tell your wife. Your wife is like your best friend. Your spouse is supposed to be your best friend. Everything on the news you do, you call them up. Hey, this happened, before you tell anyone else. Right. And so he goes straight to his wife. We all know his wife hugged him and threw the blanket on him and covered him up, right? Because he felt, comfort and solace with her. And then she embraced Islam when people disbelieved me, and she helped and comforted me in her person and wealth when there was no one else to lend me a hand, right? She was, of course, a wealthy person that helped him, support him. And I had my children only from her. That's true. At least only one that survived. Okay, so the 4 daughters of the Prophet came from Khadija. There was another son, Ibrahim, that came from Maria Qibtiyya. We'll talk about her later on, but he died in his infancy. Didn't last very long. I think he died when he was 1.5 years. So basically, he was a mother to his children, right? And the one thing is that taking care of the children, that's something as us as men, obviously we appreciate a lot, because obviously that's, I know when my wife gives me the kids, I'm like, I don't know, I tell her, I don't know if I'm not built for it, but I don't have a certain amount of patience. I'm like, you know the kids very well, you were with them every single day. So when I get them for one time, it's just like, I don't understand when's the meal time, when the snack time, I don't get those, things. They, mashallah, Allah, put barakah in how they handle the children. So that's something that, I'd rather go to work. I'll come back to the kids afterwards, inshallah, I'll play with them afterwards, right? Definitely spend time with your children is amazing, right? So anyhow, so this shows how much the great Khadija was. And there's another saying here that the Prophet, Aisha radiallahu anha, later on, when the Prophet married her, she says that I never felt so jealous of any woman as I did for Khadija, though she had died 3 years before the Prophet married me. Like, well, 3 years, pretty much a good time. And that she was, because I would hear him mentioning her too often. Also, kept on mentioning how great Khadija was and how much he misses her, okay? And because his Lord ordered him to give her the glad tidings that she'll have a palace made of jewels in Jannah. Okay, so that's one thing that Jibril came to the Prophet ﷺ and said that Khadija is coming your way. Before she comes, let her know that Allah wants to convey to her that she's going to have a palace in Jannah. We don't have any narration of any other wife or any other really person that has some narration like that. So it shows you how great that she was. Okay, and because he used to slaughter a sheep and distribute his the meat to her family and her friends, even after she passed away, as an honor, right? How much love that he had for her. Okay. And we have this hadith also, where the Prophet mentioned that the best of the 4 women in the world is Khadija ibn Khuwaylid. Khuwaylid is her father's name. Fatima bint Muhammad, this is the daughter of the Prophet. Maryam bint Imran, that's his Maryam alayhi salam, the mother of Isa alayhi salam. And Asiya bint Muzahim, she's the wife of Fir'aun. So she did a lot of great things, living in the house of Pharaoh and also still being a believer. And we'll go into other details if you will. So these are great people just to learn about what they did and what were their characteristics. Why did they get that title for? After that, now the Prophet doesn't have a wife, right? Doesn't have the protection. So there's 2 things going on here. It was suggested that he marry someone named Sauda radiallahu anha. Now Sauda was a woman that was married to this person named Sakhran, that she migrated to Abyssinia. Remember, we were talking about the Muslim went to Abyssinia and were living there, right? She was in the second migration there. And on her way back to Mecca, she came back. They didn't stay there that long, and her husband passed away while she was gone. She was a bit of an older woman. Okay? And so when the Prophet heard about that, it was offered that, you should marry Sauda. She's a strong believer. And she was quite older, like I mentioned, and the Prophet still married her. Okay? That even though she's a widow, and so forth, and show that the Prophet would help the widows and help other women. And the majority of the women that he married were widows, actually. There's some exceptions to that, okay? And it was even mentioned that she would say that, she's like, why do you want to marry me for? I'm an older woman, and I'm living like, I'm not, basically I'm like, I'm not even attractive anymore. Like, but the Prophet wanted to marry her, and so they married her. And then she said that when the Prophet married Aisha, radiallahu anha, that she gave up her time, like, Prophet would balance the time with the wives, that she would give up her turn and let him stay with Aisha. Like, she knew that the Prophet liked Aisha and spend time with her, that I'm an older person, it's okay. You know what I mean? You can give up my turn and you can stay with her. Okay. But anyhow, this was the first woman that the Prophet married after Khadija. And we're going to the marriage of Aisha next week, inshallah ta'ala. After that, so now the Prophet has a wife, someone in the house to kind of support him, be there emotionally. He has to go out and find someone to support him politically. Okay, no one in Mecca is supporting him. Obviously, that's pretty much the norm for the last 10 years. So he said, hey, if you're not working in one place, go look in another place, right? It's almost like your job. If you're not happy there, put your resume out somewhere else, right? Maybe someone else will hire you, right? Not happy with your salary, etc. Just find out someone else to support you. And so he does that. He needs to find out someone who's going to support him. So he goes to this place called Ta'if. Ta'if is around 55 miles east of Mecca, and I put a little Google map thing here. Ta'if is like way down here, like you could say southeast of Mecca. I'll show where Medina is at, way over here. So the Prophet walked over here. It's 55 miles. 55 miles on an animal The animals cover, they said, around 40-something miles a day. So, this will take a little bit more, a day and a half to get over there. Okay. And I looked in here in Google Maps. You can look in there and zoom in. There's nothing there. There's no trees. It's just sand and dirt and rock, right? It's going to be a very, very hot time. So to get over there. So he goes to Taif there, and he takes Zayd bin Haritha. And we went over Zayd bin Haritha. I went over this maybe 2 weeks ago, or maybe that he was the adopted son of the Prophet ﷺ, or the servant in the house of the Prophet ﷺ, and he decided to stay with the Prophet ﷺ and not his own father. So he takes them, only 2 people, to go to Taif. Prophet ﷺ obviously going to do all the talking, right? They have someone else there with him. Goes there. There's the tribe. I don't know why it's blinking like this, but anyhow, the Bani Thaqif is a tribe there in Taif. So he meets with the leaders, tell them, hey, this is about Islam, worship only one God. And they had a statue, one of the main idols that were there also, that they would worship. Okay, and started preaching to Islam with them. They were quite insulting in their reply. They mentioned that has not Allah found someone more else to entrust his message? And look at you look simple. Like, there's someone else that God would pick other than you, right? That's quite a condescending, insulting statement. And so basically, they didn't accept the message. The leaders. The Prophet stayed there 10 days. Trying door to door, different villages, talking to different people, right? To try to accept the message. People weren't buying it. People did not want to accept it at all. And you travel 55 miles in the hot sun, and no one is buying the product that you're trying to offer to them, right? That's going to be quite, concerning and depressing. And so, what's more depressing is that the people started mocking the Prophet ﷺ, even the children. And they started throwing rocks at him, calling him names, and chased him out. Imagine this, the Prophet ﷺ is around the age of maybe 50 years old at this time, 50-year-old man, okay? That's preaching, and he's getting chased out by children out of the city by calling him names and throwing rocks at him. It's mentioned that he got cut in his leg and he was bleeding, and to the point that he has to go out of the city and then finally find this orchard, this area there, to sit there and under the shade and just catch his breath because they were throwing stuff at him. This is where the days where Aisha radiallahu anha asked the Prophet later on, what is the most hardest day in your life that ever happened? And she thought it was going to be the Battle of Uhud, which we'll go over later on. She said, no, it was the day of I went to Taif. That I went there and preached, and these people chased me out of the town, throwing rocks at me, and no one would take on my message. My uncle passed away, the wife passed away, the people on Taif don't even care about me. I don't know about me and you, it's like a good time to you maybe give up and try something else, right? But obviously we all know with the deen, we don't do that. But you can see how that thought might come in your head. Things are just not working out, right? That's why the prophets were so great, because they had this himmah, they had this determination that they just were rock solid. Even though it's raining and lightning everyone else, they see a gleam of light somewhere, and they're just going to keep on trying to get to that light, if you will, right? And that's something that's made them amazing. Even though they're human, they're going to cry and they're not going to feel good. And then we'll see that while the Prophet is sitting down there, bleeding out by his legs there, catching his breath, right? Him and Zayd bin Haritha, only 2 people, right? He probably doesn't want this news to go to Mecca, everyone to find out what happened to him, because it's going to make him look really bad, right? At that time, there's a little boy named Adis, who is a servant in that orchard that he's at, and the owners of this orchard says, there's some guy over there that's taking shade over there. Who is this guy? They sent him, go over there to their servant boy, go over there and find out who he is. Maybe offer him water or something. We don't even know who he is. He goes there and gives the Prophet some water, right? And then the Prophet, before he drinks, he says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. And others says, who are you? No one in this land says that word, right? And then the Prophet said, who are you? He said, I come to a place called Naviva, where Yunus alayhi salam was from, and I follow. I'm a Christian. I'm Christian, like the true Christian, if you will. Not that Jesus is God, but Jesus is a prophet. And he said, no one speaks like this. He said, I am a prophet, and I am one of the brothers of Yunus alayhi salam. In terms of prophecy, right? They're all brothers. And then the boy goes and takes the Prophet's hand and starts kissing it. And then the master in that orchard tells the boy, what are you doing? What are you kissing his hand for? You're my servant. He says, come back over here, and pulls him back, right? Tells him, come out of here, right? But that boy believes him, that one little boy, okay, right? Not even a grown man, but a boy believes in the Prophet. But that boy would never meet the Prophet ﷺ if he was not chased out of Ta'if and didn't go through the whole thing. Would the Prophet ﷺ rather have the leader of the Ta'if believe in him? Of course. Right? But Allah subhanahu works in certain ways where, yes, those guys are not going to believe in you, but this little boy is. And that's gold. Right? That's gold. Right? Someone's going to believe in you then. Okay? Then also, and then at the same time, the angels of the mountains, the Prophet ﷺ sends the angels of the mountains to the Prophet ﷺ. Jibreel alayhi salam comes to him and says, I have the angel of the mountains here. We just saw what happened to you, right? And Allah will support you. If you want, we have the angel of the mountains here. If you want, they will take the two mountains that are around Mecca and just squash the people. And they'll be done, okay, for what they have done to you. Some narrations said that they will squash the people of Ta'if. It's two different narrations, okay? So if you want that, we saw it, they deserve it, look what they did to you. You just let us know, give us the green light, and these people will be done with. What do you think the Prophet ﷺ said, right? He said something very, very beautiful. It's a great lesson for all of us. Where the Prophet says that I rather hope, instead of killing them, I rather hope that Allah will produce from their descendants. Nothing's going to come from them. These people are not very learning, they're not taking on the message. But their descendants, their children, such people as they will worship Allah, the One, and will not associate partners. That inshallah ta'ala, their children will become Muslim. Maybe they will not become Muslim, but their children will do so. The Prophet ﷺ is, he's not short-sighted. He's thinking about the long-term vision, if you will. You plant a seed, everyone's, there's no plant there, this is a waste of time. Come back 4 or 5 years, you see this massive, apple tree. Okay, everyone's happy, everyone loves those apples. Okay? But if you were, criticizing why are you planting a seed here, it takes too long, right? It's like investing, right? You want the stock to grow up, like just go, five-fold in one day. You want to become millionaires, right? But you have to sit on it and let it grow. It'll take a little while, and then you're like, oh, I'm glad that I bought this and bought that, right? And so the Prophet ﷺ is looking at the long road there. And that's how me and you, my dear brothers and sisters, when we're giving da'wah, or whatever good that we're doing, maybe our family, maybe our neighbors, maybe our co-workers are not accepting the message, but hopefully someone down that line. And I've seen the story very much before where someone says, I was in my house and my dad had a Quran on this table and I picked it up and I started reading it. I don't know how it got in our house. And now they became Muslim, right? So somebody gave his father a Quran, like, I don't want this book, why are you giving me this book for, whatever, and they put it away, and then their children, whatever, found it, and what is this? And they started reading it, and that's how they even got it. I've seen stories like that before, which is pretty amazing, subhanAllah. Okay? So this is where the Prophet said, no, don't kill them, right? Inshallah ta'ala, the message would reach them there. Also, look at this now. The Prophet was praying tahajjud prayer. We talk about how tahajjud prayer is something that was obligatory to the Prophet. I want you to stop here and think about this. The Prophet just got chased out of Ta'if, bleeding from from his ankles, been there 10 days, traveled away from his home, probably doesn't have much food and water with him, right? This little boy, alhamdulillah, accepts Islam too. But what do you do? He says, I want to pray tahajjud. I don't know about us, you're like, no, I just need a week off. Let me just go vacation, let me just sleep in for tonight, right? The Prophet said, no, let's pray tahajjud. I need to charge my batteries. You plug your phone in every night. So same thing, let me pray tahajjud. Charge it up again because of what happened. So the Prophet doesn't take no break. Prays tahajjud. While he's praying tahajjud, there are jinn, okay, that hear the recitation in the Quran. And yes, it's known that jinn like to be in dark areas and stuff like this, maybe out in the desert. And so that's where they were living. And so they hear the Quran for the first time. And then they come by and they said that, this verse in the Quran mentioned here, they said, I mentioned to Muhammad when we directed a few of our jinn listening to the Quran. They heard it, that you were reciting it. And when they attended it, they said, listen quietly. And when it was concluded, they went back to the people as warners, meaning that they believed in it and they told the people believe in it, right? So here, even though the Prophet went out 55 miles and the people didn't believe in it, a little boy and people that the Prophet didn't even see, became Muslim, right? And that's the one thing, you'll do things in your life and you might not see that's apparent in front of you, but years later, you'll see the benefit of it. That really works with children a lot, right? You do stuff for your children, you try to invest in them, teach them certain things. Like, man, this kid's not learning right now. We teach them this and teach them that. And years later, then you're like, oh my God, he's actually look how well-mannered he is now. I never thought he would ever respect his elders ever, but one of the most greatest, kids ever now, or whatever. Now they're reading Quran now they're praying now, whatever it may be. Okay. So here that the angels were able to, the jinn will listen to Quran, they became Muslim and they followed the Prophet ﷺ. But now the Prophet ﷺ still needs someone to what? Protection in Mecca. He has a wife now, alhamdulillah, right? But now no one accepted his message in Taif. He's going back to Mecca, right? Now, he cannot enter Mecca now without somewhat type of what? Protection. So what he does, he stays outside of Mecca, sends letters to certain people. Hey, before I enter the city, I need someone to come and protect me. Because once I walk into that city, guess what? They're going to go at me. And I can't go back into Mecca without somebody saying that, hey, I will give you protection. Who in the world want to give the protection to the Prophet? His family doesn't want to. His uncle is dead, right? Passed away. So we're going to go over next week, inshallah ta'ala, of who steps up to that and protects him. And then we'll go on to where leading up to the migration, leading up to the migration of the Prophet ﷺ to Medina. And we'll talk about those things, inshallah ta'ala. Questions or comments as we end for our 5th session for today? Anyone want to clarify anything? So a lot of good points here that at least that we could benefit from. A lot of lessons were of patience. You never know, don't give up on people. And also this is how the Prophet ﷺ always have a determination to do good. That inshallah you'll see the benefit even though you might not see it appearing in front of you. At the end we'll make dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Anta salam wa minka salam tabarakta ya dhul jalali ikram. Allahumma salli wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask you to send the blessings on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and his family. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask you to accept this class from us that we're doing today. Put it on our scale of hasanat and yawm al-qiyamah. Make it a proof for us and not a proof against us. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, help us follow the steps of the Prophet sallallahu and his sunnah. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun al-mursaleen. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Barakallahu feekum. May Allah bless you. We'll see you guys next week. Go ahead. Okay.
So, the Prophet ﷺ, he had a daughter, Zainab,
yeah.
and she had a daughter, Umama.
Yeah.
Do we know anything about what happened to Umama?
Umama, I have to go and look that up exactly who she married and what happened to her. Yeah, I mean, there is a narration where the Prophet ﷺ was praying and he brought her out, of course, as a baby, and then she ended up crawling on his back and stuff like that. But as she got older, I need to look up that. I'm not recalling from the top of my head, but inshallah, I'm going to look up for you. Yeah.
So I heard that narration about Khadija radiallahu anha, that she was the first believer, and I heard the narration was weak. Even though there was truth in what it was, the content, but yeah, I heard the narration was weak from another show.
I'll have to look at it. I mean, obviously, that's the first person the Prophet came up to, and obviously she believed him.
Yeah.
But there's also multiple narrations of the first person that believed believer was Abu Bakr. There's another one that says that it was Ali, or this person, that person. So the way the scholars break it, mention that, well, how do we understand these different narrations is that the first believer as believing woman, believing child, so that's how they kind of understood. That must have been what the context is. I think it's quite clear that Khadija was definitely the first person because that's where the Prophet went to first. Warqa bin Nawfal was maybe second or something like that. Yeah. All right, anything else? And may Allah bless you guys. Inshallah. Dr. Siddiqui has his class in about 10 minutes. Stay for that and benefit. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.